Hey everybody, I'm John at Collect Cards. Hope you're all doing well. It is Wednesday, Valentine's Day, February 14th. This is a VR for Hodges 1455. Brian is asking us to share a couple of cards and maybe a few memories of pitchers who could hit. Maybe in particular hit home runs, but who could, just overall at the plate were pretty good hitters. So I'm actually going to mention four pitchers here. Two of them I'm going to really run through cards quickly, and then the other two I'm just going to share a little bit more. The first, so really in the 80s when I was growing up, I was more of an American League fan, but I watched a lot of Mets and Braves and Cubs games over the years, and just the names I would always hear as home run threats, especially or just good hitting threats, but particularly long ball threats, were Rick Rhoden. Although I'm showing him here with the Yankees, Rick Rhoden, another one with the Yankees, and here's one with him with Pittsburgh. So Rick Rhoden was in fact, he was like a multi-sport athlete because the guy played like on the senior golf tour, I think, later, or maybe he might have even tried out for PGA events as an amateur. Maybe I think he was apparently an excellent golfer as well and did lots of pro-am type stuff. But he was known to hit several home runs over the course of his career and was just a good hitting pitcher. And then the other one was Don Robinson. Don Robinson was another name that whenever he came to the plate, you just never knew. Maybe he was gonna tag one. So a pretty good pitcher in his own right. Had a long career just like Rhoden did. So those were two guys who were kind of like the known quantities for me anyway. Kind of just whenever they stepped to the plate, that maybe they could do some damage, get a knock here or there, maybe an extra base hit. But the other two players I'm going to mention here, the first one is a pitcher who I never got to see pitch because he pitched in the 50s primarily, maybe just barely into the 60s. And I only have one card of his actually, and that's going to change at some point this year because now after reading about him a little bit today, I put one of his best cards on my want list, VCP want list to try to just keep an eye out for at some point, and that is Don Newcombe. So this is the only Don Newcombe card I have, I think, currently, and that's his 1961 Topps NL MVP card from 1956. And yes, he was the most valuable player in 1956 as a pitcher, and he also won the Cy Young Award that year. And I believe it may have been the first Cy Young Award. Which at that time I believe was only one award for both leagues. He won 27 games that year in 1956. And in addition to being one of the league's best pitchers for about a 5 or 6 year span, he was also a very, very good hitter, as it turns out. So I jotted down a few stats in front of me here. He had a lifetime 268 career batting average. He had 15 home runs in his career. And if you look at Baseball Reference, 162 game average, he averaged 5 home runs and 37 runs batted in with a 268 average over a 162 game kind of average pace. I mean, basically you had another infielder or like a fourth or fifth outfielder on your bench who could come up and deliver if needed. So Don Newcombe was a fantastic hitter in his own right and an amazing pitcher for a decent stretch for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And I think he made it to LA for 58, and then they traded him in 58 to Cincinnati. And he pitched a few years in Cincinnati and ended his career with Cleveland. And then that was his career ended kind of abruptly, I guess. And he lost 2 years for military service in the 50s, right when he was kind of getting into his peak. And when he came back, he kind of took over the NL there for a couple of years. Just a great pitcher. And so I would love to get his 1956 Topps card. It's it's pretty easy one to get in terms of price. It's not too bad in terms of an outlay. But so one thing I wanted to mention about Newcombe also is that the reason I'm mentioning him and looked him up today, there's a fantastic article about him in The Athletic that I saw this morning actually. And his teammate Carl Erskine was talking about him a little bit, and a couple of other people in the Dodgers organization from back then who I guess kind of still recollecting. So I recommend you check that out. I'll put a link to it in the description for that Athletic article that was out there today on Don Newcomb. Subscription will be required for it, but if you've got one, you'll be able to check it out. But at the same time, it's a pretty good website. And the second card and the last card I'm going to share in this video with a little bit more of a memory, because I remember particularly this one game. And if you're an '80s guy like me in terms of growing up, my first year collecting was '78, and I collected through '91 really, so all through the '80s. And there was one game in 1985. My favorite team's the Yankees, but watched a lot of Mets games as well. And there was a certain game that happened on July 4th, 1985, that stretched into July 5th. And again, a lot of you, if you're kind of grew up in the same window there as I did, you know full well what game I'm talking about, especially if you grew up in New York or a Mets fan or even a Yankees fan. And that is the ridiculously classic Mets-Braves game that went 19 innings and ended at about 4 in the morning, maybe a little before or maybe a little after, I can't remember. But I watched that game, not in its entirety. My brother and I watched that game. It was just the start of summer vacation, and it was the 4th of July. So we were just kind of flipping around the TV late at night, I guess, and when we saw that the game was actually still on, we were like, holy crap, what's going on here? And it was sort of like in the 10th maybe or 11th inning at that point, and it was probably, if it wasn't midnight, it was probably pretty close to it. And we learned that there were like 1 or 2 rain delays during the game, and it was just one of those games. And like, it was just ridiculous. And so the Mets took the lead, the Braves tied it, and the Mets took the lead again in the like 18th inning. And then this guy came to the plate with 2 outs, and I think it was an 0-2 pitch, because I've just watched the video recently again, just to confirm how ridiculous it was. This guy was like an 0-70 hitter for his career at the plate. So he was not a good hitter, but he hit arguably one of the most famous pitcher home runs of all time. So he hit a home run off Mets reliever Tom Gorman. I couldn't have named that without watching the video again recently. But he hit a home run on an 0-2 pitch in the bottom of the 18th inning at about 3:30 in the morning to tie the game again at like 11:11. It was just one of the most ridiculous moments that I recollect, that I remember watching growing up in baseball. And a weird part about that was my dad was working nights at the time, and so he came home probably surprised that we were still up watching the Mets game, and I think he knew that it was still going on. I think he did. And we watched the rest of the game. The Mets ended up scoring like 4 runs in the 19th inning, and the Braves got like 2 more, and then finally they lost. Finally the game ended. But it was just one of those ridiculous games that you kind of remember. And Ralph Kiner for the Mets called the camp homer, and none other than John Sterling, who has really made his career as the Yankees announcer for the last 30 plus years. John Sterling called the game for the Braves, called that home run for the Braves. So just 2 classic clips that you could find on YouTube, and check that out if you've never seen it before. I encourage you to do so, because it's pretty out there. Pretty cool stuff. So there's a little memory there. They're not like real. They're not like deep cuts, so to speak, on an album, so to speak. But they're pretty easy to recollect if you grew up in that time. But I just thought I'd take the time to share here. So again, Brian, thanks for the opportunity. Again, Don Newcomb, great hitter as well as a great pitcher. And I'm looking for his 56 card. Thanks again. Hope you're getting a lot of VRs on this. And take care, everybody. See you on the next video.